Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi, 1 week at a time. Today we are starting a new Masechet Bava Kamma, and therefore this is the first class in this Masechet. And not only are we beginning a new Masechet, but we're actually beginning a new book of the Mishnah. If you all know from the song, there are 6 books of the Mishnah. We have just finished. As of last week, we finished the first 3 books. And now this is the 4th book. This book is called Nizikin, which means damages. And we're about to begin this book of the Mishnah. It's in Hebrew, it's called a Seder. And it is those of you who like law, torts, damages, anything like that, then you're going to love this. Those of you who less enjoy that, so buckle up. So that's what we're going to be doing now for a while. This is quite a long seder, the Masechet. So let's just discuss what it's called. It's called here it says Bava or Bava Kamma. The word Bava actually means gate, and Kamma means first. So the truth is that the first 3 Masechtot were actually one big Masechet called Nizikin, and it was broken up into 3 separate Masechtot. So the first one is called the first gate. The next one is called Baba Mitzia, which means the middle gate. And the last one is called Baba Batra, which means the last gate. So this is really all one huge Masechet. But it is split up into 3. So we are beginning Masechet Bava Kamma, the first gate. This Masechet deals in damages. The reason there's a picture of an ox over there is because we'll learn in a minute that an ox is one of the main categories of damages. And what's interesting about this Masechet is we're going to talk about liability of damages and the person who either does the damage or owns the property that did damage. And it's important to recognize that the owner or the person who did the damage has this responsibility, right? We have a responsibility to guard first of all, ourselves and our possessions to make sure that they do not harm other people or other things. And if they do, we need to compensate the person for whatever damages were done. So we're going to talk about general categories, then we'll talk about different levels of liability, and we're going to discuss it in general and then get very specific. What's important to recognize is this Masechet, and definitely for the next few Masechtot, it's less about stories and more about analytics. And those of you who have been doing this for a while, you're already used to the language of the Gemara. This is going to be very analytical. So you are used to this type of learning, but it'll be a little bit more intense in this Masechet. So let's begin on Daf 2. As everybody knows, the Gemara starts on Daf 2, Daf Bet. It does not start on Daf 1. As we've said at the beginning of every Masechet, either it's because there is no first page. The first page was, right, we already started it last week when we've learned before. There's no beginning and no end to our learning. It is constant. Another interpretation or idea is that the first page is derech eretz, right? Being a good person, right? We say in Pirkei Avot, derech eretz kadma leTorah. First, you need to be kind to the people around you, then you can learn Torah. So however you want to understand it, I think both of them are beautiful. Let's jump in to page 2. So here we go. Daf Bet, the Mishnah tells us. That there are 4 avot nizikin. The word avot or av literally means father. But if you remember, we did have this in Masechet Shabbat. The concept is that there are general categories, and from there are what's called toladot. Those are subcategories. If you remember in Masechet Shabbat, we had 39 avot milacha. There were 39 general categories, and each one had subcategories. So the same thing here. The same thing here in the Mishnah. There are 4 general categories of damages or damagers, things that cause damage. What are these 4 categories? An ox, and don't worry, we'll explain each one of these. An ox, a pit, meaning a hole in the ground, something called mav'eh, which we're not sure what it means. The Gemara is going to explain it in a little bit. And the 4th one is fire. Each one of these 4 things causes damage, and we're going to see that really they are general categories. So the Mishnah even tells us each one of these is unique. How are they unique? Again, one explanation for mav'eh is a person, right? A person can cause damage. So it can also be another explanation is that it is a part of a. We'll leave it at that. Okay. So how are these things unique? So an ox and a person are living beings, right? That's different than fire and a pit. The first 3 things, meaning an ox, a pit, and a person, are mobile. A fox, an ox, a person, and fire are mobile, right? They move, as opposed to a pit, which is stationary. And what's the overall common theme is that all of these things cause damage, and you're responsible to guard that they don't cause any damage, you being the owner. And if they do cause damage, then you have to pay for any damage that was done. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Now the Gemara says, and if you remember at the beginning of a Masechet, it's usually linguistic questions. So the Gemara says, why are these 4 categories called avot? What does it mean that they are general categories? Does it mean that there are toladot, right? Meaning subcategories. And if there are toladot, are they similar or are they different than the general categories? Meaning, what's the law? So the Gemara now goes to Shabbat. If you remember, as I mentioned before, in Shabbat we have avot, general, and toladot, subcategories, and they are similar, meaning there's no distinction between if something is a general category or a subcategory. You get the same punishment. However, right, if you do an av, a general thing, and then you do it like a derivative of it, you only get one punishment because you've only done one category of work, of action. But if you do 2 avot, meaning 2 actions, but they're different categories, you get punished twice. So then the question is, what does the word av mean? So in Shabbat, it means it's an action that was used to build the Mishkan, the tabernacle that was in the desert. A tolada is something that wasn't used in the Mishkan, and that would be the distinction between the av and the tolada. Let's go to a different concept, same concept, a different example. We also have the example of Av, of this general category, when we're talking about impurity, right? Tum'ah. Tum'ah, impurity, has three avot, three general categories of things that cause impurity. One is called sherets. Those are the creepy crawly animals that if they die and you touch them, you become impure. One is shichvat zera, which is a seminal emission, which causes impurity or any emission from a person's body. And the third one is tumat met, right? Getting impurity from a dead body, right? These are three general categories, and these make people and utensils impure. The toladot, right, subcategories are things that are less, maybe one would say less potent, right? They make less things impure. They only make, they don't make people and utensils impure, only food and drink, and therefore they are on a lower level. So here we see Av and Tolada having a different meaning. Okay, let's go to the first main category, which is an ox, a shor. Okay, so it's shor in Hebrew, means ox. And the Gemara tells us that we are going to divide the category of ox into three main categories. Those will then be subdivided into subcategories. So what are the main categories of shor, of an ox? We have keren, which means the horn, right? So now it's important to understand that when we use the word horn, so it means like when an ox gores someone, right? Like rams into them with their horn, like you see on the picture, right? The horns are very sharp, but we'll learn in a minute, it doesn't mean that has to be the exact way the damage was caused. Rather, we're going to make it into more of a general category. But we are going to call this the category of the horn, what's called keren in Hebrew. The next one is called shen. Shen is a tooth. This is damage through eating. The animal went into your garden and ate all of your tomatoes. Okay, that's called shen. Okay, shen, tooth. The third one is called regel, a foot. That means the animal ran over your vegetable garden, I don't know, whatever, your clay pot that was sitting in the yard. Okay, so that's trampling. So those are our three categories. So we have basically goring with a horn, eating with a tooth, and trampling with his legs. Okay, let's move on. So now we're going to go through each one of these. So keren, the horn. How do I know that that's a general category? Because the Torah tells us when an ox gores a person, that's called goring, ki yigach, and that is seen as damage, and you need to compensate for that damage. There are two verses that teach us this. Why do we need two verses? We're going to learn later on, but I'll already teach it now, that if an ox does damage, there are two types of cases. The ox could be this innocent ox that has never done anything to hurt anyone. If you've read the children's book Ferdinand, there's a children's book about a bull that doesn't want to fight. He just sits around and plays with the grass. Okay, so we'll see in a minute. The Gemara is going to talk about the nature of an ox, but the idea is that we're going to learn the concept of tam. Tam means innocent. This ox has never done anything to anyone in its life, and all of a sudden it gores someone or something. So that's going to be a certain type of liability, as opposed to what's called an ox that is mu'ad. Mu'ad means that it has already behaved in this violent manner, and now you have to really be careful. And that's going to have a different responsibility. So we need 2 verses to teach that the ox has two distinct responsibilities, whether it was tam, innocent, or mu'ad, already proven to have been a little bit violent. Okay, now the Gemara teaches us these subcategories of Keren, of the horn. What are subcategories? If the ox pushes something and causes damage, bites, squats down on something, or kicks something. What's the point here? That it's not about the part of the animal that's doing the damage. The question is, what is going on in the animal, right? If the animal is attacking maliciously, then that's called Keren. That's called horn. That's called goring. Even if it, right, if it kicks, even though it's using its leg, it's still called Keren because it was malicious. It was not accidental. Okay, so that is the way we understand Keren,
It was,
a malicious.
not malicious.
Sorry?
So if it was like malicious, would it be like mu'ad, or could it be you mean malicious or malicious?
Oh, thank you. So malicious meaning a intentional act of aggression. It could be tam or mu'ad, meaning the innocent animal can get angry and gore something or someone, and the, we'll call it the violent ox can also do it. So correct. It doesn't matter if it's tam or mu'ad. You do have different responsibilities to each of those animals, but Keren means right. This category of damage means an aggressive act on behalf of, right. This animal is being aggressive. Okay, right. Again, as we said, what does it mean mu'ad? So what does it mean that it was established that this animal is aggressive? So the Gemara says that if the animal was established to have attacked a person already, so then they're seen as also aggressive towards animals, right? Because they would be less scared to do that. However, if the ox has only been aggressive towards animals, it does not mean that they are mu'ad, that they are right, prone to attacking people as well. So there's a distinction between animals and people in terms of what this animal is going to do. Now, we mentioned biting as a subcategory. Now, as we said, wait a minute, there's another main category called shen, which is teeth. So shouldn't biting go under shen? So the Gemara says no. Shen, which we haven't discussed yet, but that category, that main category is about an ox getting benefit, meaning the ox was hungry and you had a beautiful tomato plant in your garden. So it walked over to your garden and ate the tomatoes. It caused damage and you're responsible, but that's very different than the ox coming to your garden and kicking down all the tomatoes, right? And I don't mean like just walking over. I mean like kicking because it's mad, right? So shen, tooth, right? Shen means when the animal gets benefit. But here, generally, when an animal bites you, it's not because they think that you are yummy, right? They are mad and they're biting you. And that's why it's seen as Keren, a malicious act, as opposed to Shen, which is for its own benefit. We also said kicking. Now, shouldn't kicking be regel? Again, regel means foot. So the Gemara says no. Regel is when damage is caused by a common action, meaning the ox was walking down the street and it happened to step on your whatever, clay pot that was sitting on the floor. It was just walking by. It didn't mean to do it. It was just a common action. So that's regel. But if an animal kicks you, that's because it's mad, not because it's just walking down the street. Okay, so now the Gemara says both the main category, which is Keren, and the Tolada, the subcategory of Keren, which would be kicking, biting, any one of those things, all of them mean, as we said, intent to damage, right? It's an aggressive act, and you should have watched the ox. So the liability is the same between the general category and the subcategory. Okay, let's move on to regel and shen, right? The foot and the teeth. So the Gemara gives the source in the verse. It says when you send forth your animal, that's regel, because you send forth, right? You tell your ox to go, to go into the, I don't know, the corral, and it stepped on something and it broke it. So that is regel. And it says, and then it consumes something, that's shen, right? It ate something and that it shouldn't have. So that's shen. Okay, daf number 3 tells us that, again, you might have thought that these verses both teach either shen, right? Either tooth or eating. But the Gemara says, no, that's not the case. We need one verse for shen and one verse for regel. Okay, now the Gemara tells us what are the subcategories of shen. Again, we said shen is damage done while the animal is gaining some sort of benefit, right? Like eating. So a subcategory would be an animal rubbing up against, we'll say the ox, right? He rubs up against the wall to scratch itself and he knocks the wall down. Okay, so he's not angry. He didn't knock down the wall because he was mad at the wall, but he was just kind of getting, scratching an itch, and the wall happened to fall down. Or he has an itch and he decides to roll over all your tomatoes in your garden. So he's getting benefit and he ruins your garden. Again, as we said, all of these are similar to the main category of shen. What is this? The animal gets some sort of gratification, but damaged your property. And again, you should have guarded the animal. Okay. What are these subcategories of regel? Again, regel is walking. So it's damage done by its body while walking. Or let's say it was walking down the street and it has hair, right? Again, if we're talking about a different animal, and then something got tangled in the animal's hair and it drags it along and it breaks it. Or the pack on the animal, right? If you have a donkey with a big pack and something gets tangled in that and breaks an object, or the bit, or the bell that's on the animal, all of these things while the animal is walking damage something on the way. So again, as we said, what is this category of regel? Common ways, right? The animal is just walking down the street, but causes damage. And again, you should have guarded your animal. And again, we see that the av and the tolada, the main category and the subcategory, are similar. There's no distinction. Okay, again, we're looking for a distinction between the main category and the subcategory. So let's go to the next one, a pit. So a pit is you dig a hole in the ground and then someone or something fall into that pit, more something. So a pit, so the Gemara says, what's the main category versus the subcategory? Maybe it's the main category is that the pit is 10 tfachim deep, right? We've seen this, right? 10 hand breaths. We've seen this measurement before. If you remember in Sukkah, in Eruvin, 10 hand breaths creates a new domain. Here we're going to see that 10 hand breaths are very dangerous. That deep is very dangerous. I don't know how big that is. I think this is probably, maybe it's about 50 inches. I don't know. 1, 2, I don't know how many it is. Maybe it's about, I don't know, a bunch of inches down. You could do 10 hand breaths. Okay, versus what would be the subcategory? The subcategory would be if the pit is 9 tfachim deep. Why? So the Gemara says 10 tfachim deep causes an animal to die. Meaning, if it's so deep and I don't know, a dog falls into it, it's going to die because it's so deep. The impact is going to be very dangerous. But if it's only 9 tfachim, the animal will get hurt, but it won't die. And the Gemara says, no, both of these, 10 and 9, are avot. They are general categories. One for if the animal dies, and one if the animal gets hurt. So now the question is, what is a subcategory of the pit, of the bore? What's the subcategory? The Gemara says it's a person's stone or a knife or a burden, like a knapsack that you left in the public domain, and it caused damage, right? So you left this like rock on, on a little ledge, and then someone got hurt from that rock. So that was your damage. So the Gemara says, well, wait a minute. If you left it there and it was ownerless, so do you have responsibility? Do you not have responsibility? And the Gemara is going to talk about that later on. The Gemara says, how do we characterize the damage done by a pit? It's a dangerous space that was dangerous from the beginning, meaning as soon as you dug that pit, it's seen as dangerous. And again, it's your pit, and you needed to guard it. Naomi is asking about less than 9 tfachim. That is an excellent question. The Gemara is going to discuss it when we get to bore itself. Excellent question. Right now, we're not discussing that. So when we get later on, we have to wait patiently. It's a long Masechet, so we'll get there. We're just touching the surface. But excellent question. Let's get to mav'eh. If you remember, we said we don't know what the word mav'eh means. So there's actually a machloket. Shmuel says mav'eh is sen. Again, tooth that was damage done, if you remember, through eating or getting benefit. Rav says mav'eh is a person, if a person does damage. So the question is, what would be a tolada? There is no tolada. There is no subcategory for a person. The Gemara says, well, maybe if he's asleep versus if he's awake. And then the Gemara says, no, a person has responsibility for oneself, whether they're awake or asleep. Again, as I just said about Naomi's question, every one of these things we're going to be discussing at length. This is just touching very briefly on each thing. It's almost like this is like a trailer for all the things we're going to be discussing for the next few months. Okay, let's go to esh, fire. Right, what would be a subcategory of fire? Again, if you left your stone or a knife or a burden on the top of the roof, like on the edge, and then it fell and it caused damage, that would be like fire. And it has to be that it was knocked off of the roof by a regular wind, not like a hurricane. Like a regular wind or a breeze knocked this off and caused damage. If it causes damage as it's falling, because it's moving, it's like esh, it's fire, because fire moves and causes damage. So again, right, fire is damage caused through the force of something else, right? Meaning the fire itself is dangerous, but there's wind that comes and blows it into, let's say, somebody else's property. Okay, we're going to, and then finally, the Gemara says that what is remember, we were looking for something that's a subcategory that would have a different law than the main category. And this is something called surorot. Surorot means pebbles. Let's say the animal was walking and kicked a pebble, and that pebble goes and breaks a window. So on one hand, right, it's a subcategory of a regel because the animal was walking. But on the other hand, it didn't directly cause the damage. It indirectly caused the damage, and therefore you only have to pay half the value of the damage. And that is the case of the subcategory being different, right? A different law or different liability than the main category. Okay, let's go to mav'eh. Okay, that was so that was shor. Now we're going to do mav'eh. As we said before, it's a machloket if it's shen, right? Is it like the tooth of the ox that causes damage, or is it a person? And each opinion brings a verse, but none of them is like perfect. And spoiler alert, we're gonna not resolve this conflict, meaning we're not sure what mav'eh really means. Daf 4 says, again, if I have the shore, if I have the ox listed as one of the damagers, why do I need another general category of the tooth? Can't that be under ox? And let's say that maveh means a person. So the Gemara says, no, we do need to specify the shen, right, the tooth, because it's different than keren, than the horn. Because if you remember, right, keren, the horn is intentional damage, whereas shen is unintentional. Remember, the animal is just eating. You had really beautiful tomatoes. How could I stop myself? I need to eat them, right? It's very different than an animal goring, right? Running and charging towards another animal or a person, right? So the Gemara is going to say we can't learn one from the other because they are each unique. Okay, so we said that again, if the word ox in our Mishnah is really keren, maybe it's regel, which again, remember we said is a common action like walking, and maybe mav'eh is shen, which is not common, but you're getting benefit. But then we don't have keren, right? We're missing the third one. And again, that is unique. So again, we need all three. Okay. And then the question is, maybe it's a person. But Shmuel says, no, it's not a person, because later on, though we haven't learned the next Mishnah yet, but later on, man is mentioned as a damager. So why do we need to mention a person in our Mishnah? Right? That's why Shmuel says it's not a person, it's shin. Rav says, no, man is only mentioned later because that Mishnah is talking about things that are already proven to be dangerous. And we're going to learn a concept, not now, but we'll learn it later on. In Hebrew, the concept is Adam mu'ad le'olam, meaning a person is always seen as having the potential to cause damage, right? Remember, if you remember, we talked about the ox, right, who has never done anything ever, right, like Ferdinand. So that ox, we don't expect it to do bad things or damage things. but a person can do damage. And therefore, one has to be very careful to not cause damage. Okay, right. The Gemara then tells us that the liability is different, right? Again, we said each one is a unique character, has unique characteristics. So an ox and a person, if they each cause damage, have different have different outcomes, right? Or different liabilities. So if an ox causes damage, or if an ox kills a person, so the owner of the ox has to pay a certain amount. We're going to learn this. But if a person kills a person, you don't pay any money. You actually get capital punishment. So the result is very different, and therefore we needed two separate categories. Whereas, let's say an ox does damage, you only have to pay back the damage that was done. But we're going to learn that if a person does damage, a person has to pay not only the damage that's done, but 4 other things. And we're going to discuss that in a minute, what those 4 things are. Okay, the Gemara says that all the things listed in the Mishnah that we discussed at the beginning have a nature to damage, right? And a person maybe who's sleeping also can cause damage, right? And again, as we said, you have to be very careful with yourself and with your property. Okay, now we get to our Mishnah listed 4 main categories of damagers. We are now going to see 2 other lists. The first list is by Rabbi Oshaya, and he says there are actually 13 avot Nizikin. There are 13 primary damagers. Now he is going to, we'll see, like redefine damagers and add things that we're familiar with, but again, we're not in our Mishnah. So he adds that there are 4 watchmen. We're going to learn this in this Masechet and later Masechtot. There are 4 people who are asked to watch, guard, take care of another person's item. This is somebody who is called Shomer Chinam, which means a person who, you just asked your neighbor a favor. Can you do me a favor and just watch my plant and water it every day? And I'll be back in a week, right? And then you come back and the plant is dead, right? How responsible is, that would be me, so don't ask me to watch your plants. I will kill them. I mean, not intentionally, of course, but, right? So Shomer Chinam, what does that mean? You ask someone to do you a favor. If someone's doing you a favor, they have a certain level of responsibility. We're going to learn that's very different than if you pay somebody, right? If I pay a service, right, to come and take care of my garden, so then, right, or my plant or whatever it is, they have a higher level, right, of responsibility because I'm paying them, right? Let's say someone borrows something from you. That has a different level of responsibility. And the last one is someone who rents something from you, right? Those are called, in the Gemara, it's called the 4 watchmen, Arba Shomrim. And they each have a certain level, a different level, right? They're each unique. That's the point of this. They're each unique in their level of responsibility. Okay, so that's 4. Now, we have a list of 5 types of damage that is done, right? So now it's not about the person who is damaging, but it's about the damage that's done, right? If a person, as we mentioned, let's say a person causes damage to another person, right? They break their leg, right? They push a person down and they break their leg. So as we mentioned, they have to pay back 5 different things. One is what's called nezek, which is the damage that's done. Again, how you determine that we'll discuss. The next thing they have to pay is what's called tsa'ar, right? The pain you caused that person. The third is called ripui, which means the doctor's bills. You need to cover the doctor's bills for whatever damage you did. The fourth is called shevet, which means unemployment, right? If the person now can't work for a month, you need to compensate them for that. And the last thing is called boshet, which means humiliation, right? If you are now, you embarrassed that person, you need to pay them, right? Or compensate them for that humiliation. So that's called the five things that a person needs to pay when they cause damage or harm to another person. Okay, so that was 4 shomrim, 5 damages, plus the 4 in our Mishnah, that gives us 13. Okay, so the Gemara discusses these different things, how there are different consequences if a person damages property or if a person damages another person. So if you thought that was a comprehensive list, we have another list, a list of 24 damages. So the 13 that we mentioned, plus basically the Gemara goes through anytime a person does something and the Torah says that they need to pay some sort of compensation to the other person. So this could be if someone stole something, if someone, we've seen this before, rapes a woman or seduces a woman, there's a payment that's paid. If someone defames another person, if someone makes someone's property or produce impure or forbidden to get benefit from, all of these things, the person needs to compensate for the damage that is done. So that gives us 24. I didn't mention all of them, but you get the idea. And of course, we're going to go through all of these things. So that is that. And then the Gemara discusses how each list is different because the person compiling the list was only making certain categories and not others, right? So Rabbi Oshaya, that was the list of 13, didn't include the things that Rabbi Chia mentioned because he was only talking about compensation and not penalties. And here the Gemara talks about the concept or the distinction between compensation versus a penalty, what's called a knas. A knas means it doesn't matter who did it or how they did it. You have to pay this certain amount no matter what. That is a penalty. So some people count that in their list and some people don't. We also have another concept here, which is damage that you can't really see, right? This is called, there's a machloket. If I cause damage that I can't see, is it called damage, right? If I took your produce and I now made it impure, right? Let's say it was truma and I made it impure and now you can't eat it. I damaged it, but they look the same. It's the same tomatoes. Nothing happened to the tomatoes. So the question is that called damage or not? And that's a very big machloket that we'll see not now. But the Gemara discusses, is that seen as damage or not? Okay, so as we said, the Mishnah says that each of the avot each of the general categories are unique. Therefore, it needed to be taught individually. You can't learn one from the other. Remember, the Gemara always likes to derive things, like one from the other. We cannot derive these things separately because each of them is unique. Right, again, as we said, there's a unique characteristic to each one of the general categories. So what's unique about Keren is that, remember we said there's a difference between the innocent animal versus a provenly wild animal. Shen and Regel, the foot and the tooth, because they are exempt in the public domain. We'll learn this later on, but if you left something out in the middle of the street and my ox ran over it, it's not really my fault because you left it in the middle of the street. If you left it in your backyard, that's a different story. Bore, remember the pit? Remember we said that's only if an animal falls in, but you're exempt for damages to a utensil, or you're exempt to damage if a person falls in. Again, the person should have watched where they were going. It's interesting, right? If you're talking about like a liability for your property, right? If someone trips on your sidewalk, are you responsible or not? So we'll talk a lot about that. A person is unique. As we said, they have to pay 4 extra things if a person does damage. And fire is unique because you do not have to pay for something that was hidden inside something else and was damaged. Or it also maybe it does include if there was damage done to something that was not flammable. Okay, Daf 6, the last daf for today. The general category mentioned in the Mishnah comes to include, right? Again, we said, what is it coming to include? You're saying it's a broad category. So what is it coming to include? We saw this before. A person's possessions, meaning a stone, a knife, or a burden left on the roof, and if the wind knocks it down. Again, as we said, if it caused damage as it was falling, that's seen as a fire. If it falls on the floor and then something, and then it causes damage, that's called bore. That's a pit, because again, it's damage that's on the floor. So we say, no, it's not like a pit, because a pit is just sitting there. The knife first had to get blown off the roof, and then it fell on the floor. Okay, it could also include a pit, a bore, that was moved by a person or by animals' feet, meaning this is something that causes damage because of something else that kind of pushed it. It could also come to include if a person opens or shovels out their septic pit into the public domain and it causes damage. So you are liable for that, even though it's in the public domain. Again, the Gemara asks, what's the case? Is it that it's moving? Because if it's moving, then the person caused it, like directly. If it's stationary, then it's like a pit. And the Gemara says, no, it's not like a pit, because again, it's something that was put into the public domain with permission. The Gemara says that in the winter time, because anyway, there's a lot of like mud in the street, you can open up your septic tank into the street because it's just going to get washed away with all the rain. So then it is permitted to do this. And if it causes damage, so then you are liable. It also comes to include a wall or a tree that you were told that you needed to demolish it. And let's say it says, right, you have 30 days to take down this wall because it's very dangerous. And let's say you didn't take it down after after 30 days, and then it falls and damages something. So then you are liable. It's not seen as being ownerless. It's as if it's yours and you are liable. Okay, now the Gemara tells us that you need to pay the damages from your best field. The Torah tells us from Meitav Sadehu, right? Sadehu means his field, and the best mitav. We're going to learn that there are 3 levels of fields. The first one is like superior quality. That's called edit. That's superior quality. There is average land. That's called benonit, average. And then there's something called ziburit. That is inferior land. Of course, we're going to discuss, is this objective? Is it subjective? We're going to discuss all of that. So the Gemara says, you have to pay from the best of his land. So now the question is, who is his? Who's his, right? We have 2 parties. We have the damager and the damaged. Here in the Gemara, in Hebrew, it is the nizak. Nizak means the person who was damaged, right? His property was damaged. And you have the mazik, right? Some people say mazik when they want to say, right, this child is a troublemaker. So some people use the word mazik. He's a troublemaker. He causes damage. So mazik is the one who causes the damage. Nizak, the person who was damaged. So the question is, whose superior field are we going according to? The person who needs to pay, or the person who's going to be paid, right? The person who was damaged. So Rabbi Ishmael says we go according to the one who was damaged. Rabbi Akiva says we go according to the person who is going to pay, the person who damaged. So the question is, right, if again, the ox came and ate from your vegetable patch, and this vegetable patch was beautiful, it was superior. So shouldn't you compensate with your superior land because it ate from this beautiful superior land, right? Or do we say, no, we look at the person who is going to pay, and we say, we're going to take the best land that you have, right? It's not about what it did, but it's the best land that you have. And that is the machloket, right? What happens if there's a discrepancy between, right, the damaged party's best land and the damager's best land, right? Who do we go according to, right? Because my best land could be equal to your inferior land, because you might have even better land. So that's really what the Gemara is asking here. And the Gemara is talking about, do we go according to, again, the one who's paying or the one who is paid? So the Gemara is going to stay with this machloket. We're going to talk more about it next week. So that's all for now. I think I'm going to open it up for questions in a minute, but we will be continuing next week, Be'ezrat Hashem, regular time and regular day. So I just want to wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom. I'm going to stop the recording, and then if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.